Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Real Stories of Success. Today I am so excited to sit down with one of my favorite people, Garrett Andrews. He's got an incredibly exciting story to tell. So Garrett, welcome aboard, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So today we're really excited to really dive into your story. You've built a business that I am incredibly fond of. It's right in the industry that I love as well. And so really would like to get started, if you don't mind, by just kind of, telling the audience a little bit about your story. Tell us a little bit about kind of what you're working on right now, and bring us up to speed if you don't mind.
Yeah, so CSI is almost 10 years old now. When I started it, I never dreamed that it would be as big as it is now. At the time, I was working in IndyCar and was wanting to get off the road and kind of control my travel a little more, get back to short track racing, which I was passionate about. And so I was just hoping to get it big enough to replace my IndyCar salary someday. And we've been blessed with a lot of growth, and everything's been really, really good. We're, like I say, almost 10 years in now.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
For those audience members that don't really know what it is that you're doing, give us some background. Tell everybody out there what it is that your business does and provides and that kind of thing.
Sure. So we are a custom manufacturer of suspension components. We specialize in short track racing, so everything from little 5-year-old kids in their quarter midgets to midget sprint cars. We still do suspension tuning for a team at Indy every year for the 500. And we continue to add to that. So we're adding other things that our customers could use. We just purchased a steering business this summer, kind of doing the same thing, but in the steering side of things. Pretty much custom suspension and steering now for short track racing, and we service customers all over the world.
Great.
That's exciting. So tell us a little bit about how, how'd you get into this business of racing? I know a lot of people, when they think racing, they think, driving race cars and, NASCAR, maybe IndyCar. But tell us, how did you originally get into this, and kind of how did this, I wouldn't say a niche, but just you picked a segment of the racing industry and you really have built a specialized business around that. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so I grew up in a family that had race cars, grew up on the West Coast, and family had a sprint car team in the early 80s. And then I started racing when I was a kid, and it just kind of grew from there. I was fortunate in high school to go to work for a company that Jeff Gordon's mom and stepfather owned, and they built racing components. And so I think, other than my paper route, pretty much every dollar I made has been in racing. I've stayed in racing. When I moved to Indiana, it was because there was more opportunities to work in racing there. And then once I got onto the IndyCar side, I really was intrigued by suspension and shock absorbers, and I liked that the shock guy kind of had control of his own environment. You worked in your own room, you did your own things, you kind of carried your own hours, and so I was just really passionate about shocks and dove in and wanted to learn everything I could about shocks, and I worked on shocks at a high level in IndyCar and NASCAR, and I was able to take all that knowledge and things I learned and bring it to short track racing, which they weren't used to having suspension custom tuned for their application like the high levels of motorsports were.
That's exciting. That's exciting.
That's great. So tell us about the early days, right? You kind of went into that a little bit, but when you were getting started and you're working in all these things, does a light bulb switch go on and you say, hey, I'm going to start making this stuff, or what's that look like? When do you make that transition?
Yeah, so when I started CSI, I was still, it was at Andretti Green at that time. It wasn't Andretti Autosports yet, and I was just doing it kind of on the side, building shock absorbers for some buddies who were racing sprint cars, and we started just tuning other manufacturers of shocks, Penske shocks, some AFCO shocks, and as that evolved, we went from just making little bitty pieces to tune that shock and make it better for that individual to, before we knew it, we'd made so many components. It's like we need to have our own product line because we've made 80% of the custom pieces for this shock. But probably 6 months after I started CSI, I was so busy with work, it was hard to juggle my IndyCar job and CSI. At that point, I was young enough. I didn't have kids yet. I wasn't married. And I thought, if I'm ever going to take the plunge and try to make a full-time go of this, now's the time. And so I did that. I just went full-time with it. And for a long time, well, not a long time, but it was just me and one other guy and then two other guys, and then it's grown from there.
So out of necessity, huh?
Yeah.
So tell us about that a little bit, because I know that's a step that a lot of people would like to take, is maybe starting their own business.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that a lot of people are maybe a little bit afraid to do, is, step outside of their comfort zone, step outside of the guaranteed money of having a normal job. And, you really did that. You walked away from probably what I would imagine was your dream job, working, in IndyCar at the highest level.
Yeah.
And then you stepped out. What were maybe some of the fears that you dealt with going through that transition? And, maybe was there a person or a mentor that really helped navigate those early days when you were getting started?
Well, yeah, it's very daunting. You have a very good salary, more money than I ever thought I could ever make in racing, getting a paycheck every 2 weeks and benefits and insurance and all that stuff. And you walk away from all of that as an entrepreneur, and you don't know when you can pay yourself. And that is very intimidating. But at the end of the day, you're steering the ship. In IndyCar racing, they refer to it as Black Monday, the Monday after the season. You don't know if you're going to get laid off. Does the team have a sponsor? And so that can be unsettling. But if once you take the plunge, like I say, you're steering the ship. So as long as you're willing to put the time in and the work in to be successful, it's not as intimidating as you think. It's like once you get over that and you dive in, you just got to keep paddling,
Definitely.
So a couple years ago, you had the opportunity to sell your business, and then again the opportunity to buy that back again. What'd you learn in that experience of going through and selling something you built, and then taking that back over? Talk to the audience a little bit about what'd you learn from that.
Sure. So when I started CSI, I never was thought about selling it. When they approached us about purchasing it, one, it was flattering that somebody was interested in something we'd built, but I still wasn't really gung-ho about selling it. But with any business and growing business, there's a lot of stresses involved. At that point, I think we were 5 or 6 employees, so you had payroll, and you got to keep feeding the fire. As business grows, we got to have inventory on the shelves. Conventional small business financing is pretty much non-existent in today's banking world, so we had a small line of credit, but we were always juggling things. At that point, there were weeks where I couldn't pay myself because I had payroll, and we were just growing. We were profitable, but the business continued to need to grow. Our inventory needed to grow, and our expenses kept growing. So when they came in, they said, hey, we can take all those stresses away from you. You're going to be able to focus on growing the brand, growing the business, developing new products, and that's the things I was passionate about, right? Like, I didn't see myself as a business guy. I was a racer. I love to see my customers succeed. I love to develop new products. So once they pitched that to me and we really thought about it, the timing was right. We just had a baby. This was going to give us the capital to make some other investments. We purchased some real estate properties that were investment properties for us. My wife was able to stay home and raise our little boy. And so all of that was great. But about 2 years in, I signed a 3-year employment agreement. And a couple years in, I'm like, gosh, I'm still working long hours. I traded one set of stresses for another. They were 100% honest. I didn't have to worry about money to make payroll and all of that. But working with a big company, they had a lot of expectations. They wanted to quantify a lot of things that I didn't really think made sense. We were the smallest company they owned. And so I was still working all these hours, but it's not nearly as gratifying when it's not yours.
Sure.
And so when it was time to renew my contract, I said, I'm not really interested in coming back. I might do something else. And then the opportunity presented itself to purchase it back. And that was something once they presented that to me, I just had to figure out how to do that responsibly, make sure we structured the business where we could be successful. But we'd built a team, and I didn't want those guys to be left out in the street. And if I left, I didn't know where the company was going to go. And as a business owner, you start to take on the responsibility of not only yourself, but your employees and their families and their overhead expenses. And so it was really good to be able to keep our core team together, buy the business back, and then grow the business from there.
I think that's one thing that's really cool about you, and just getting to know you personally the last handful of years is how much you really do care about the people that are that you're serving and that are working with you day to day. I know that everybody in the industry that I know that you've had working for you, just absolutely raves about your leadership philosophy and how you just truly go above and beyond to make sure that they're well taken care of. So tell us about that a little bit. Your leadership philosophy and how you really have built this brand that so many people just you've got I don't know how many, but probably hundreds of race cars that are flying your flag and people are wearing your apparel. I mean, you've really built a brand that shows people that you really, really care about that. Would you mind, elaborating on that a little bit? Because I think that's something a lot of entrepreneurs maybe struggle with a little bit.
Sure. So on the employee side, I remember the first time I went to a racetrack and I saw a customer that had our shocks that I didn't exactly know who they were. In the early days, I took every order, I built every shock, I packaged every shock. So I was very hands-on. Well, then we grow to a point where I physically just can't talk with every customer, and we have other people that answer the phones, and people call and ask for another employee, and they're not asking for me anymore. And so that was eye-opening that we need to have a strong team, and the business is being built not only by me but by everybody else. And you're only as good as your people. I don't consider myself a business guy, as I'd mentioned earlier, so I study a lot. I listen to a lot of podcasts, I read a lot of books. And as you study the business leaders and the people who are successful in this country, they all have the same traits. They all have the same philosophies, and it's that way for a reason. And so I've tried to model after some of that. And how can I learn? You're always learning. I feel like my leadership and managerial skills are better today than they were last year. But as far as building the brand, we've just always really believed in adding as much value to our customers as we can. They have a lot of options when they're spending their money. And how can we give them the most value for that? I always take more pride in somebody who calls and orders a second set of shocks than their first, because that means we did our job. They were happy with the performance of the product and also happy with the service that we provided. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of companies that make nice shocks and suspension components, but it's who can the customer work with to get the most value from their hard-earned dollars. And at the end of the day, most of those people, they're spending their extra cash and they work really hard for that money. So how can we give them the most value for that?
I love that.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that, right? A lot of the people on this podcast have some of those same traits, and that's what we're learning as we get going into this, and it's kind of cool to see this pattern evolve as we interview more people. I've got a question for you. So, not knowing a ton about the racing industry, but really interested in the business side of things. What are some of the avenues you're using to market your shocks? What is it social media? Is it paid advertising in other areas? What's that look like for you?
So we do some social media marketing as we see our demographic continue to get younger. That's a very easy way to advertise. The cost of entry is pretty affordable, and we can directly quantify what that ad revenue is doing for us. But honestly, the biggest expense that we have as far as advertising is just being at the events. So we go to about 80 events a year. We travel coast to coast all over the country with a support trailer helping customers. If we don't have our trailer, every weekend we have myself and probably up to 3 other employees at events helping customers, and that's just a huge expense. Again, adding value to the customers. We're there kind of working hand in hand in the trenches with them, and that's the easiest way for us to make sure our products are performing properly, make sure our customers are happy, and try to grow the brand. Because when we're at those events, we're meeting people, right? They might have a competitor shock and they're like, gosh, those CSI guys are here all the time helping their guys. I want to be their guy,
Yeah. And I'm going to toot your horn a little bit, Garrett. I mean, you said you have a little presence on social media. I would say you have got an exceptional presence on social media. I mean, you are, if there's a word that comes to mind when I think your name, it's consistent, and you're there day in and day out doing the little things that it takes to be successful. I mean, there's rarely a day that goes by I don't see an Instagram story, talking about your products or, promoting your customers. I mean, you really do an extraordinary job of that. And I think that's something that, you're always top of mind. Austin and I talk a lot about that in the real estate business. I mean, just simply answering the phone and being top of mind those are free things that you can do to grow your business that don't cost any money. And I think you really do an extraordinary job of that. How do you, and so where I'm going with that is how do you manage to do that consistently every single day? I mean, all the way down to you do a Facebook Live every single Monday night without exception, even on vacation. So how do you manage that discipline? How do you build that consistency into your schedule to make sure that those little things are getting done day in and day out?
So Facebook is nice because I can do all my posts for the whole week on Monday. So typically first thing Monday morning, I try to identify big races we won, whether customers tagged us or we just, hear about it. And we'll do all of our Facebook posts for the whole week on Monday mornings. And then I just set aside the first 15 to 20 minutes of my day every day to make sure we have some presence on social media, whether it's an Instagram story, Twitter, something like that. this is something that I'm not extremely familiar with. I'm not a marketing guy, but I've read a lot. I've tried to learn a lot. And then anytime there's downtime, if I'm waiting in line at the drive-thru, I'm making some type of social media interaction, whether it's replying to a customer, doing an Instagram story. And I just think it's important to have something every day, be interactive with those people. And again, as our demographics getting younger, customers like that. They like being accessible. One of the biggest challenges for entrepreneurs today is it's not just a matter of checking your voicemails and replying to customers. You got voicemails at shop, on your cell phone, emails, Facebook messages, Instagram messages. There's so many ways for people to connect with you, and trying to reply to all that, that can be pretty daunting. So any bit of downtime, I'm trying to, stay engaged with our customers.
That's great. That's great.
One of the things that, and you actually mentioned this while we were off air, one of the things that I enjoy hearing about and listening to is how did someone build their business, right? And you actually mentioned a podcast, how they built it, which I will definitely be downloading after we leave here today. But let's talk about that for you. So you were mentioning, one big thing for you was all of a sudden they weren't asking for you anymore. They were asking for somebody else, right? What are some of those pains maybe? What are some of those challenges that, because I feel like a lot of people out there, they can do it themselves, right? And they can do it with maybe one or two people, but then they grow in 3 and 4. What are some of those challenges you had when you were building?
Yeah, a lot of it's just is employees, right? Finding the right people that fit your team, that can do things the way you would want them done, and then trusting them to do their job, right? So at the end of the day, I put people in place that I feel can do the job as good as I can, or probably better than I can, because I'm spread so thin in other areas. So a lot of it comes back to our employees. We have 10 employees at our shop. Everybody's a racer. They've either driven race cars, work on race cars, race fan. So they're passionate about our products, and they like to see our customers succeed. So we don't have anybody in our building who doesn't know when they're building a part exactly where it's going, who it's going to, what type of race car it's going on, and that's very important to me. But you face a lot of challenges as an entrepreneur and growing, and we mentioned earlier, conventional financing isn't easy, and trying to make sure you have the capital. There's always things you want to do. You want to go to more events, you want to design new products, but you also have to make sure that you're doing that responsibly, and you're doing things that the company can afford to do, and that are going to be the best for your customers,
Definitely. I want to circle back to something you said just a little bit ago. And, you said that maybe you weren't, you don't think of yourself as a business guy, and you've had to learn a lot of this. And one of the things that we've seen as a consistent trait, among people that are achieving success at a high level is, finding somebody and modeling that approach. Who are some of those mentors? Who are some of those people that you really modeled your business around, whether it be around marketing, whether it be around business strategy? If you don't mind maybe sharing, who are some of those people that have really had an impact on your business and, yourself?
Sure. So, as I mentioned earlier, I happened to go to work for a company that was owned by Jeff Gordon's mom and stepdad, and Jeff Gordon's stepdad's sister, Patty, ran it. It was MPD Racing. We built sprint car components. So I did everything there, from operating CNC machines to running our marketing and doing sales and customer interactions and product development. I was there for, 7 or 8 years. And so I learned a lot there about how impatient racers are, how you got to have stuff on the shelf, a lot of the do's and don'ts in our specific industry. From there I got into the racing side of it, and, I worked for Rusty Wallace and worked for Michael Andretti, and I saw how professional their operations were, how presence is so important, that first impression with customers, coming into a clean facility and things being organized, and when they receive their product, it being nice. So a lot of that. And then just as we grow, marketing, I see who's being successful in marketing, right? You watch Gary Vaynerchuk and the things he's doing and says to do, and it just changes, right? You just have to keep studying, because when you think you've got it mastered, that's probably when you're going to go downhill. So I'm always reading and listening to podcasts and trying to identify what can I do better, because even though they're in a totally different market, a lot of it, interchanges with what we do.
Absolutely.
I think you actually led into this question pretty well on what your answer was there. One thing that I think a lot of people know about the racing industry, it's got a lot of competition. I mean, there's a lot of brands out there. How does CSI stay apart? Like, how are you setting yourself apart from that crowd?
We just try to add the most value to our customers. At the end of the day, we have competitors that build a product equally as good as ours, but who can help that customer get the most out of that product? If I build a guy an expensive set of shocks, but he doesn't know how to set them for a given track condition, he's not going to be happy with the money he spent. Our product's not going to look good. So it is very competitive, and you're only as good as your last race. And when we have a customer that jumps to another brand, I mean, that stuff used to just keep me awake at night. Now I just try to look at it from a different angle. Why did we lose that guy? What could we have done better? And just improve. I feel obviously very confident about our product, that we build as good a product as anybody. But I think where we beat most of our competitors is just being in the trenches, helping customers, being more accessible. Every one of my business cards and my email signature has my cell phone number. All of our sales guys are the same. So, my customer can call me anytime they want. They can text me anytime they want. They can Facebook message me anytime they want. And I'm going to do my very best to reply to them timely and give them the most value for their hard-earned money they spent with us.
I think that's so huge. And also, when I talk about that in the real estate side of business is, speed of response is just imperative to people now. I mean, people's patience level, I think, across any industry is about zero.
Yep.
And, if you don't get back to people incredibly quickly, I mean, yeah, they maybe lose a little bit of trust or lose confidence in what you're doing just because they're, they want a response right now. And I think you really do an extraordinary job of that. And, shifting gears just a touch here, but one of the things I love about what you've really been working on here over the last few years is, you've built an incredible suspension business, and now you've taken that business and you're expanding it into other realms of the racing industry that really parallel or maybe complement CSI really well. Would you mind maybe telling everybody about that a little bit, and what are some of the growing opportunities that maybe you've seen to acquire a couple other businesses that complement CSI, and what have you learned from that?
Yeah, so this summer we purchased a steering repair and rebuild business. So it's the same core market we're in, but now we're helping people keep their steering gears and steering pumps at a high level. So we're just trying to cast a little bit bigger net, so people who aren't CSI customers can still see the value from us. We launched last year at PRI the Pit Logic app, and so whether people are a CSI customer or not, they can benefit from this app that is basically a race management program right at their fingertips. So that's another way for us to engage with customers. We realize everybody's got a preference, and some people might not want to use CSI shocks, but we want to give them an opportunity to do business with us, see the value that we can bring, and then maybe they will be a shock customer at some point. So recently we just we're partners in the acquisition of Schroeder torsion bars. We're partners in Chalkstick torsion bars. So we're just trying to grow the offerings that we have and products that we feel very confident in selling to our customers, and try to give people value and let them see that doing business with CSI is a pleasurable experience.
Awesome.
I love that. So heading into 2020, what are some of the things that are on the horizon? Tell the audience, what do you have planned for CSI and now all of its other companies?
Yeah, so we're always, trying to evolve and build better products. So we have some new shocks in development that I think are going to be revolutionary for the industries we're in. Trying to get the torsion bar deal going and making sure customers are getting the bars that they want and they've relied on for so long. A lot of torsion bars, there's no magic there, right? These guys who built these things 50, 60 years ago, they identified the best materials, the best heat treat processes, so making sure that the recipes are being followed and guys are getting what they want there. Continuing to grow the Pit Logic platform, we're adding new features to that all the time. And then as far as CSI is concerned, we're just bursting at the seams at our current facility. So we're hoping to break ground on our new facility. We have acquired a piece of land, and we're going to build a kind of a forever home for CSI in Brownsburg. And so starting construction on that and hopefully moving in this time next year.
That's fantastic. Tell us, a little bit about, some of those different steps that you're taking, from a growth standpoint. You're growing your business, you're acquiring other other businesses. You're growing your customer base at an extraordinary rate, I would imagine right now. What do you really attribute a lot of that growth to? The word that you keep using here, and I love, is value. But beyond just providing value, how else are you really attributing that growth that you're currently experiencing? Because just in the handful of years I've known you've just done some amazing things in that industry alone. So is there any other feedback or any other advice maybe you would give an entrepreneur, somebody wanting to start their own business, for how to do this and how to be successful as you have been?
So I think a lot of it's been a good economy. That's helped a lot, and hopefully that can continue through the next election. The economy has been really good, and that's helpful for racing. The big thing is when you look at customers and them doing transactions with you, it really needs to be a personal experience, right? It's not just a transaction. You ordered something, we're taking your money and we're shipping it to you. It needs to be a personal transaction, a personal experience, so that customer felt good about where they spent their money. And then the advice I would just give anybody that's starting or trying to grow is there's no shortcuts. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort. There's going to be nights you don't sleep, and you'll get over that hump at some point. But there's still today, I probably work 70 or 80 hours a week. That was probably over 100 a few years ago. But if you love what you do, it doesn't seem like work. There's not a day that I get up and don't want to go to work. I'm passionate about what I do. I love what I do. So that makes it a lot easier. It's not like I worked 100 hours. I just was 100 hours doing what I love. And so that's important.
As we start to wrap up here, talk to our audience. What does success mean to you? What does success mean to Garrett and CSI? And kind of wrap us up with that question.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely changed from day one to now. When you're younger, material things are successful. If you have a nice car and a nice house, you feel like you're successful. Certainly as I've grown and I'm a dad now, and that changes. So successful to me is seeing our customers succeed, right? So obviously there has to be money in the bank to keep the business going. We're of no use to our customers if we're not here 6 months from now. Right. But success is seeing our customers succeed. I get as much joy out of seeing a guy win a race today as I did 10 years ago on our product. So that definitely makes us feel good. And then just hearing from customers that, hey, you really helped our program. You were always there for us. We bought a set of shocks. We had our best year ever. Whether they never won a race, if they won their first heat race, that's success for us. Customers that are happy, and they're happy to spend their money with us. All those things just make us feel good and make us feel like we're doing the right things.
Garrett, I cannot tell you how much we appreciate you coming in. I've taken a lot away from this, from the standpoint of just always be providing value and always making that experience personal. I think that's something that so many businesses struggle with is, they treat things transactionally versus, building relationships with their customers and really making sure that experience is there. So I really can't thank you enough for taking a few minutes out of your day to come in and sit down with us. So
I love to, if we have another takeaway, the hard work. And there are no shortcuts, right? Yeah. We get that a lot. We get a lot of people are like, well, how do you guys do it? Well, it's hard work. It's hard work and no shortcuts. So if you guys are looking for takeaways out there, that goes across any industry.
So, sure. Thanks for having me.
That's it. Garrett Andrews, Competition Suspension Inc. We definitely appreciate everybody's time. If you took something away from this, and I don't think there's any way you possibly couldn't have, be sure to hit the subscribe, rate, review, ring that bell, tag us on all of your social platforms. And Garrett, one last thing, if anybody wants to reach out to you, has any questions, or maybe is just curious about the racing industry or a little bit more about your business, how can they reach you?
Easiest way is probably email. It's just Garrett@csishocks.com. You can message me on Facebook. Call the shop, however you get a hold of us. Yeah,
cool.
And
Thanks.
Just a reminder that we also have that Facebook page that if you guys are listening to this on iTunes or whatever, there is a video of this as well, so you can get onto our Facebook page and come check out the video, YouTube, all of that kind of stuff.
Cool. Thanks so much for this episode. We appreciate everybody's time today.
Thanks, guys.